Well, good afternoon and welcome to the homestead. My name is Jonathan, and I am glad that you have had an opportunity to join us for the premiere of Porch Talk. Looking forward to some great things this spring. The title of our series is going to be called The World at Large. We're going to begin this afternoon talking about all the things that have changed over the last year since we ended our last season of Porch Talk. There's some things that are just exactly the same, and there are some things that have changed dramatically. And so we're going to talk about that. Before we dive in, I really appreciate it if you would do me a solid and click the like button, click the subscribe button, and click the notification bell and select all notifications. And that will really help us make sure that you get these YouTube notifications so that you'll know when we're going live with a video. And then also, if you can share a link and with anybody that you think this might be helpful for or interesting for, we'd really appreciate that. And excited to grow our group. We had about 80 to 100 that watched last year, and so we'd love to grow that a little bit, maybe add 10 or 20 people, 30 people to that. And so your help is much appreciated as we do that. Well, it's been quite a year. There's been, lots of exciting developments. I will share with you, anybody out there who doesn't know yet that I'm going to be a grandpa. So this is going to be 2023. It'll be a big year for me. So excited, so proud of all of my children and all the things that they're doing, and excited to experience and go into this new phase of life this year. One of the things that's kind of interesting to me as we begin talking this afternoon, and I guess it looks like the sheep kind of came up there at first to see what was going on, but now they're bored. So hopefully no one else is clicking off of the video like them. I've got a few lambs nearby that are semi-interested, so that's good. Well, one of the things that is probably on everybody's mind that we certainly have been thinking about a lot through church, through our personal lives, through our businesses, is high inflation. And we discussed this several years ago. We knew that it was an inevitability. The money supply has just expanded so far, and not just the American government, but most every government on the planet has borrowed more money than they could ever hope to pay back. And so that has caused I guess another synonym for it would be this hidden tax, or this high inflationary environment where every time you go to the store or a restaurant or you go to purchase something, your eyebrows kind of raise and your eyes get really big as you look to see how much that item has increased, at least priced in dollars. And so one of the things that has been good, I guess, as we kind of think about the inflation a little bit, one of the things that's been really good is that it does seem that the rate of increase, or we might call it the acceleration of that inflation, has diminished. And so that's good. So at least as far as the rate that we are inflating, that is slowing down a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean inflation necessarily is slowing down, but that's at least a good sign. And so today we're going to be talking about some of the things we can do to I don't know, fight back seems a little belligerent, but things that we can do that would help us be able to thrive and not just survive in this situation. High inflation is not a new thing. We've seen it before several times. There's been several significant recessions and depressions where we've had extremely high inflation and extremely low inflation. Which each of those can present particular challenges, or even disinflation, which I guess is how the Federal Reserve describes our current environment. I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but I do think there is a certain amount of disinflation that is going on. But I want to acknowledge for our discussion today is that we are in a recessionary environment. I know that certain elements in our federal government have elected not to call it that, but being somewhat of a traditionalist for over 100 years, we've defined a recession is 2 quarters back to back where GDP growth has turned negative. And particularly negative against the rate of inflation. I think we're going on a couple years of that. And so what that means is that the standard of living that we may have enjoyed at a particular moment of time has diminished. And so we have to be more thoughtful, more careful with our spending, and we have to be really careful to guard against the accumulation of debt. Looking at statistics from 2022, and feel free to Google that and fact check me, but we reached, I believe, in either October or November of 22, new all-time high in household debt. And what that usually indicates is that people have had to borrow money or have elected to borrow money in order to maintain that same standard of life. And so we're going to be talking about that a little bit, making a determination, is that wise, is that unwise? Are there other ways that we can deal with this loss of buying power and difficult time that we're in? And I believe that there are, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And then also we're going to talk about this idea that we're a world at war, and I know we're not technically calling it World War III, but we have committed significant resources to the war effort in Eastern Europe, and every country seemed to have piled in on one side or the other, and we've just kind of gotten used to that. And of course, there have been a lot of wars in my short lifetime that we have fought, but it seems that now more than ever we've just gotten used to that idea. And so I want to kind of talk about that, maybe push back a little bit on that, why that could be concerning, and why we may not that I'm like going all anti-war or anything, but what the challenges and dangers can be at settling into kind of this second Cold War, which I guess a lot of people are kind of calling it. And then we're also going to be looking at 2 opportunities. One opportunity for the gospel message that I think has been as strong as it's been in a long, long time. And then also the opportunity that families have, if they take the right set of actions, they can really position themselves in a strong place for the next kind of season of prosperity, which I believe will come. I believe that even though we are in times that are very difficult, and in fact, I think probably the media, the mainstream media, and other information outlets probably are downplaying how hard it is for families right now. Most families, just to keep a good income going, to be able to afford food, especially if you have kids and younger kids, or if you have accrued medical bills and you're trying to pay those back, or school debt, or you have a mortgage on your home, and just the cost of buying a home. I mean, just a small, simple home has just gone parabolic over the last few years, and so this just made it very difficult to be able to enjoy the type of things that my generation, Generation X, has enjoyed over the last 20 years. And so we're going to talk about the opportunities that have presented themselves, so that when things do improve and we have positive GDP against our rate of inflation, that you'll be positioned to thrive, because it's really tough just to be in a place where you're just surviving. And I know we all go through seasons in life where that's the best that we can hope to do, is just to survive and to get through a difficult situation. But sometimes we settle for that whenever that's not really God's plan for our life. And so that He wants us to thrive, and He wants us to experience joy. That doesn't mean that joy and happiness are going to always come from times of prosperity. In fact, by no means. Sometimes those seasons can come when things seem the darkest. But nevertheless, kind of in that defeated, just surviving, just getting by, we want to try to avoid going to that place, or if we're in that place, which I'm sure some that are watching today are in that place, to kind of understand how we can position ourselves and how we can invest and plant some seeds and have a firm foundation to move forward later in the 2020s and in the 2030s, as if the Lord allows us to continue to be upon the earth during those times. Well, let's go back and talk a little bit about the debt problem and how we can kind of look or deal with that, or what some alternatives to going to debt would be if you find yourself in a place where your income is just not paying the bills. And so the first thing that I want to say, and it will probably just kind of come out of the barn, maybe a little bit hard. Well, I don't know if harsh is the right term, but just kind of maybe unfiltered or with clarity, no cushioning the blow, is just to say that you may need to diminish or reduce your standard of living for a season to get by that time. There definitely have been times throughout history, the 1930s, the 1970s, early 80s, the 1880s, 1860s, where it has just been difficult to get by on what a wage brings. There are various reasons for that that are kind of beyond our scope and time that we have today to talk about that. But we do find ourselves in one of those times where it is somewhat difficult. But part of that difficulty is our mindset. And I'm going to use a word that maybe has been a turnoff to you in the past, but I hope you'll just give me an opportunity to use it and define it. But it's this idea of entitlement. An entitlement, which probably most of us, we would, because we always think of ourselves as more innocent than what we are, we would just say, "Oh, I'm not entitled. I work for a living. I got this degree. I put my time in. I'm entitled to, or I deserve this lifestyle." And so, what I would say to that is that the Bible teaches us that humility and placing our station, our perception of ourselves below what we deserve is the goal. And so when we have that mindset that society owes us, or the government owes me, or I did this, that, and the other thing, I took these steps, so now I'm owed the result of that mindset, that way of thinking, is one that gets us into a lot of trouble. So if you can, try to begin to think about that and begin to ask yourself, do I have that mindset? Because that mindset really is the mindset that leads to financial ruin, and really emotional ruin in our lives, because it causes us to become discontent with the things that we have, discontent with our lifestyle, and to cause us to feel like there's a disconnect between how we're living and how we believe or feel that we should. And I would, especially if you are a millennial or a Gen Z, and you're just kind of getting started in the world, maybe you're in your 20s, and you're just kind of getting started, and you're looking around at the landscape, and you're thinking to yourself, man, this is really unfair to me, that prices are so high, property is so high, it just, it makes you just want to kind of quit before you even get started. And what I would say to you is, yes, it is unfair. It is definitely more difficult now to start than in 1997, for example. My wife and I got married in 1997. We made a little over $13,000 combined annual income. Of course, we were still in college. We're just getting our life started, 19, 20 years old. And so, our expectations were not that we're going to live in a 5-bedroom walkout basement home in a nice subdivision. They were just that, hey, but we had a good place to live, and we had, plenty of money for groceries, and get to eat out every once in a while on special occasions, and had money to start a family with and furnish our home and different things. So not extravagant by any means, but it was adequate. And so that's very different. That's a very different lifestyle, because $13,000 would buy a lot. We bought our first investment property. We lived in one side and rented out the other side. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car, and it rented for $400 a month. That same property today is going to be $700, $800, $900, so more than double that. And of course, food. I'm trying to remember what food cost back then. I think a box of cereal was maybe a couple dollars, maybe $3 for the really expensive cereal. Eggs were 79, 89 cents. Gas was $1 or under $1 a gallon. Maybe it was $1.19 by then. Things were just that your purchasing power, even though minimum wage was only, I think it had just gone from $4.75 to like $5.50 an hour. But still, that wage would buy quite a bit. So I would definitely agree to say, yeah, it's a lot harder. But one of the things that, and we'll talk about this kind of, we're starting off with our two challenges. We're going to look at our two opportunities later in the show. But one of the things that history has taught us is that oftentimes in those difficult times where profit margins are thin and our household budget margins are thin, that those are the opportunities to gain efficiency. And if we can gain that efficiency in all of those areas during the difficult times, when times of prosperity come and incomes rise significantly versus costs, and there's opportunities to start new businesses and side hustles and invest and to have great returns in a lower inflationary environment, then you really, if you've positioned yourself in the right way, you could just gain back, everything that you perceive was lost just in a quick amount of time. And so I would encourage you, don't be discouraged. Turn that frown upside down and look for ways to turn that disadvantage into an advantage. And it really is that is a key to so many things in life, is our perspective on situations. If we can perceive challenges as opportunities, you will have the opportunity to accomplish so much in your life. So what are some practical things? We've talked around it a little bit, but what are some specific things you can do right now? Well, we really have kind of touched on the first one, and that is just lower your perceived, perhaps, or your actual standard of living for a season. Just say, hey, for the next 1 or 2 years, we're gonna live on a budget. Maybe we're even gonna try to underspend and have some savings set aside and get our emergency fund built back up. We're gonna think about the future and just look for ways to buy in bulk or shop around, get groceries for a better price. It is amazing to me. I know going to Aldi and some of the other more discount grocers is definitely takes more time and is a little bit more difficult, but it is amazing to me how much money you can save if you're willing to invest the time you just shop around a little bit. And one of the temptations I always have is just to click a few buttons on Amazon and let it show up at my door, and oftentimes that is the cheapest way to buy things, but a lot of times you can run into Walmart or run into Best Buy or some other store and get that item for significantly cheaper. So it does pay just to do your due diligence. And sometimes it's not a matter of getting the best price. Sometimes it's just a matter of, and dare I say it, the phrase that everyone hates to hear, delayed gratification. Just saying, we're just going to do without this for a while. We're going to keep that old couch. We're going to keep that old table. I'm going to wear these shoes a little bit longer. It's amazing how many people think they've got to have a new pair of shoes every year. I guess you can make fun of me probably, but if I have a pair of shoes and it doesn't last me at least 7 or 8 years, I feel like I didn't do a very good job taking care of those shoes. And, whether it's boots or whether it's Crocs or tennis shoes or whatever, sometimes you just need to kind of wear those things till the soles start to fall off and maybe glue the sole back on. Back in the 90s, there was a store in the mall even, which I kind of renamed Satan's Stronghold. I'm not a big mall fan, but I know some of you guys are big mall shoppers, so I'm not judging you at all. But there was a good store at the mall where they repaired your shoes. So if your shoes are starting to fall apart, you take them in and you'd fix them. I mean, it costs like $2, $2 or $3, and man, you got your $30, $40, $50, $60 pair of shoes or however much it was, and man, for $2 or $3, maybe $5 at the most, they're like new again. And that store went out of business, and I think that's a sad testament to how we have just kind of become this, use it and throw away generation. And I'm not one to say keep a lot of junk around and be a hoarder and, never, keep every string and, every cutoff. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, to get crazy with it, but we probably, as a culture, we do need to do a better job trying to repair things, trying to use things longer, and maybe just saying, I could do without that, and if you're, I don't know that there's that many people that still have cable or satellite. Most everybody's kind of gone the streaming route, but and at first that was a great way to go. You could slash your $50 to $100 bill to like $5 by streaming, but now we've got our Netflix subscription, our Hulu subscription, our YouTube TV subscription, our HBO Plus subscription, our Paramount Plus subscription, our Disney Plus subscription, and so now we've kind of gone back to getting a little crazy, and maybe you just need to unsubscribe to some things for a while and just read a book, build a fire, sit by the fire, read a book, or find a place in your home that you enjoy sitting in, and just maybe not. It's probably, even if we have the money, it's probably better for us to watch a little bit less TV and do some other activities that are a little bit more productive. And again, I like to binge watch shows like anybody else, but there's just a lot of things, and we could spend hours just talking through all the ways that we could save money or stop buying things. But maybe just go without some things for a while. It's okay. It's good for you. In fact, you may find that you like the simplicity of not having so much stuff and not having so many subscriptions and streams, or that's just those shopping habits, those online perusing habits that just cause us to rack up bills. And if you haven't, if you're like, let's say you're a little bit more in my stage of life, where you've been in the workforce for 25, 30 years, and you finished your education, and you kind of in the middle of your career, and you make you're fortunate to have a good income, and maybe have some side hustles or own a business, and so you have an adequate amount of income, but maybe you have just not been using it very wisely. And I would challenge you, we always lived on a very strict budget in the early days, and that's really, I believe, what brought prosperity for us later in life and gave us opportunity to buy our first business and buy our first investment property, and be able to multiply the wealth, the small amount of wealth that we had, and into a little bit larger amount. And as you have those opportunities, sometimes we squander them by getting addicted to a certain lifestyle. And while we definitely spend less than what we make, still I kind of got away from just watching every purchase and checking our make sure that we're kind of in the categories for our budget. And because we did go through a time of relative prosperity, and things were really good, and now that we're kind of getting squeezed, and of course we've got a wedding coming up to pay for this year, and college. We got 2 kids in college, and lots of those kind of big capital expenses, improvements that we'd like to make here at the homestead, and different things and mission projects that we'd like to support. There's a lot of money going a lot of different places, and so we have Stephanie and I have taken the time to go through credit card bills and look at our spending, look at ways we could be more efficient and cut. And are we at a stage of life where we absolutely have to do that? Probably not, but it has definitely given us opportunities to accomplish more and to bring a better return than what we would have been had we not done that. So whether you're in either of those 2 camps, so hopefully I've described where most of us fall. And I know there are some that are just in survival mode, and others that are just very, very wealthy, and that's just not what's on their radar. They're thinking about more how to preserve their wealth and how to fight to not lose that wealth against inflation, which I understand. So can't necessarily hit everybody's the place that they are in life, but hopefully what I can do is to challenge you where you're at and to get you to be thinking about that. So that's one way that you fight back in a season of inflation, is just to reduce your expenses. Make sure that you're investing in opportunities that are coming up, and I'll probably, let's set that aside for a second. We'll pick that back up here in a minute. I want to look at the second challenge that we've really seen over this last year. And I had mentioned it, touched on it briefly when I was going through the overview before. But this idea of getting used to war, and I'd like for us to take just a quick, not a long journey, but just a quick journey back to the time of the British Empire, its latter days as it was winding down as kind of the world's premier superpower. And what got me thinking about this, I watched the most recent episode of 1923, and in the series, one of the sons of the ranch, the Yellowstone Ranch, was trying to get from Africa, where he'd been hunting and just kind of doing some things, to get back to the United States, and really it was only through the British shipping system that was, you had to go to London to get, from Africa in order to get back to the United States. It was just very difficult because it kind of, in the sense that all roads led to Rome during the time of the Roman Empire. All roads led to London, and also interestingly, I did not know this until recently, but London was actually the most powerful and most wealthy city in the world up until World War II, and so really interesting to see how a country that had colonized much of the world, and its influence was just far reaching, how quickly it could diminish over just a few decades and become a lesser power, and then of course the United States, or the American Empire, replaced it. And so one of the things that I always try to do in my life is to look at the past and learn from it. Learn what things brought success and prosperity, and what things brought trouble and catastrophe. And for the British Empire, as they began to be more and more extended, and as they began more and more to embrace war as, and I guess colonialism more specifically, because there's always going to be wars and rumors of wars, the Bible tells us that, but just this idea of them imposing their a political agenda and different things upon the world, that they got into a situation where their reach extended beyond their grasp, and so they began to have all kinds of struggles and difficulties, and they overextended themselves financially, and they basically lost most of the colonies. I mean, America in the late 1700s, but many of their other colonies throughout the world, they gave independence, or independence was won, and they just lost that, first their political influence, and then eventually their cultural influence. And my concern in looking at that situation is that I do see that America has tended to fall into that trap a little bit. Now, I want to take just a moment, before I get into this. I am definitely, I'm conservative. I'm big on supporting the military. I'm big on going to countries where they have oppressive regimes and overthrowing those governments and protecting missionaries and believers and the innocent all throughout the world. So I want to be really clear. I'm not necessarily taking an anti-war stance, but I am taking an anti-unnecessary war stance, let's say. And so we've gotten ourselves into a lot of conflicts. It really began with the end of World War II. We got in a situation where we realized that we were fighting a Cold War against the Soviet Union. So we started fighting them in Korea, then we were fighting them in Vietnam, then we were fighting them in Afghanistan, and basically all throughout the world. We had a brief season beginning in 1991 where we stopped doing that, and now beginning in 2014 basically, and now with this kind of escalation of the war in Eastern Europe, now we're fighting the Russian Federation, which is kind of the vestige of the Soviet Union, and to the tune of billions of dollars, and lots of undercover, or government contractor. Technically we want to say we don't have troops on the ground, but I think we all know the truth is we do have boots on the ground. It's just secretive and or sponsored by paramilitary groups and special forces, different things like that. So it's just a sign that we are continuing that saga of trying to exert our worldview, our political agenda on the world in a military way. Now, do I think that that we shouldn't exert influence throughout the world, especially to oppressive dictatorships and regimes? I absolutely do think we should. I mean, and I especially think that as Christians, we should be sending missionaries and going ourselves as missionaries all throughout the world. I mean, that's why my wife and I spent time in Ukraine on 3 different occasions. We believe in that, and so we believe in that influence and speaking the truth and offering opportunities. But I think the distinction is to do that in a forcible manner is less desirable than to try to win the hearts and minds of leaders and people, which I know you can't always do that. There are times where the military option is the only way. But I guess I'm questioning, are we seeing that the results of all of these conflicts and wars and this kind of forceful exertion of our culture is really helpful? Is it bringing the result that we want to see? Does it make the Russians and the Chinese and Iranians and such, just endear us and just want to trade with us and work with us, and are we persuading them that the capitalist freedom liberation way is a better way? Well, I think we could probably honestly, if we're honest, look at the results of all of those conflicts and wars and the money spent on those and say no, that if anything we have created a larger chasm. So I know that gets a little controversial, that maybe that steps on some toes. So again, I'm definitely, I want America to have the strongest and best military in the world, but I want us to use that wisely and be good stewards of that. Not use it in the way that the British Empire did, that ultimately led to their collapse, that they just got too overextended. And honestly, that we can see a lot of similar things happen in the Roman Empire as well, even prior to that. But has history taught us that course of action is the best? So I would just challenge us to, think about that and to begin to understand and maybe ask yourself, how can we as Americans influence the world for the good, and how can we help those in need? Is there a better way to do that, and can we use those dollars in a better way? And then just to be crystal clear, I absolutely love Ukraine and Ukrainians. I absolutely side with them, believe that they have that I want them to have an opportunity to live in freedom. And so do I want to help them? Absolutely. So just to be clear, just so there's not any misunderstanding, but how can we best do that? That's the thing that I want to kind of put on our plate, and to get us to begin thinking, because we do. The truth is, we can influence our political leaders. And you may be saying, oh, well, that's easy for you to say. You have a close family member who's a governor, and so yeah, you could. Honestly, I don't know that I do, but we all have opportunities to have influence, and so we can make a difference. I truly believe that. I don't believe we've gone so socialist and communist in this country that we can't have an impact, and so I want us to begin thinking about that, that how to overcome that challenge, so that we don't just kind of get used to that and just get used to the idea of just continuing to fight a cold war against our enemies. All right, so let's camp now. We've camped a little bit on some of the challenges. Let's camp on the opportunities, and I want to go back to the opportunity that we started to lead into. And that's the idea that we can position ourselves in a place to where when things change, when the winds change, and we move out of this disinflation, as it's technically maybe called, and we move into a time, if we develop a stable currency, which my opinion is it cannot be a fiat currency. We will have to plant our currency in something tangible. Once again, whether that's gold, silver, Bitcoin, something that has actual tangible use case value. I do believe that is going to be a requirement, that we cannot just keep printing paper and thinking that it's going to end up any different than Weimar Germany, where people, wipe their behinds with it because it came so worthless. I do think that's going to have to happen, but it will happen. History has taught us that fiat currencies never last. They always come to an end, and that ushers in a new era of prosperity. And so what is it that we can be doing to help ourselves be there? Well, the first thing that we want to do is you need to make sure that you study carefully in the scriptures the parable of the talents, and that you need to make sure that you're investing your time and wealth into assets that bring a return. Whether that's oats and eggs and beans, band-aids, and bullets, whether that is some kind of an investment property, real estate property that brings a return, whether that is investing as a venture capitalist in new companies and technologies. You do your own research and diligence. This is not financial advice at all, but find a way to invest in a way that brings a return. If you buy dollars and hold them, or euros, or yen, or yuan, or whatever, you are guaranteed to lose money. I mean, you're absolutely guaranteed that you're going to lose 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% on that every single year. So while we do need to have a little bit of that around because we got to pay for stuff, although that is changing, more and more businesses are accepting Bitcoin and Ethereum and other virtual currencies, and there's actually a bill in the Missouri-Mississippi House right now to, look at expanding its use case in the banking system, and also in many other countries, particularly some larger countries like Brazil that are looking at adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. I think we're going to see that the transition to virtual currency really helps the common person in preserving their wealth, that they don't just get constantly punished and kind of taxed in an unfair and hidden way. But whatever that is for you, whatever opportunities are in your sphere of influence and in your life, to look for ways, because when you eat a candy bar, for example, which I do occasionally, so I'm not judging you if you eat a candy bar, you are just consuming. I mean, that's it. There is no, the $1, $2 that you paid for that candy bar, that is consumed, and it, basically turns to crap. I mean, literally, that's where it's going. So it did not bring a return. So if your consumption in your life is just too high, you will always find yourself in debt with a lower standard of living, struggling to provide for your family, struggling to support your children and help them experience, good things in their life and get started in their life. And you will perpetuate from one generation to the next generation to the next generation, a life where it is just surviving all the time. And so that's why it's so important to really be very intentional and thoughtful about how we invest. And really, we're talking about it in terms of monetary value, but I mean, we trade our time for money. And so ultimately it's your time. It's how you spend your day, how you invest that, whether you invest it wisely or foolishly, that makes a difference. Some of us, we probably need to work a little bit more. Now, if you're a workaholic, then please just cover your ears for a second. But for most, for the rest of us, or if you tend to be a little bit on the lazier scheme, that maybe you just work your 40 hours and you just binge watch Netflix every night and you just, kind of waste your weekends not accomplishing anything. Maybe you do need to get, a second job, a little side hustle, just something else to make some money so that you can, get your savings in and have some money to invest with and get your emergency fund built up. Everybody's situation is different, and the second I come down and say something hard here, then it's going to be misunderstood or it's not going to apply to someone. So that I have to think about everyone in this audience. But whatever you sow in terms of your time, generally that's what you will reap. And so we want to sow wisely and thoughtfully and effectively and efficiently, and so that we can reap also in the future in that same way. The other opportunity that I want to talk about before we completely run out of time today is the opportunity for the gospel message. we went through several years where it was really difficult to do missions. I mean, we sent a small team of 9 people to Kodiak Baptist Mission in Alaska that year after COVID. And I mean, I have never struggled so hard just to get a rental car, to get a plane ticket, to be able to do missions. And we've struggled at the Navajo Reservation to have opportunities, and so it's just really been difficult. And finally, we have gotten into a season where we can get out, we can travel, we can do some things without a lot of red tape, and it is more expensive to do, but it's also possible. And I think this is a great time. This is the time where churches, individuals can grow complacent in not being on mission, or they can say, hey, we're getting back on the mission field and we're going to it. And I want to invite you to join us March 5th, that first Sunday in March. I hope I've got the date right on that. We're going to have brunch right after worship service at River Bluff, and we're going to have a meeting for anyone who is prayerfully considering going to be part of a mission project in Butte, Montana. There's just some great leaders there, some great people, and a great church that's trying to reach the lost and make an impact in their community. And so we're hoping to send a team in June, the last week in June, or somewhere there, third, fourth week in June, to go and be on mission. And so this is an opportunity where I believe we just have to stand up and say, yeah, I'm going to go, and I'm going to pay what it costs to go and be a part of that. And I think we've got the cost pretty reasonable. We're working on getting it as reasonable as we can, and maybe that's not the place that God's calling you to. Maybe He's calling you to go to a completely different place, but that's great. But I just want to kind of, I guess, draw a line and then stand and say, hey, the opportunity is here, and whatever excuses we might have had before, and maybe they were just excuses, maybe they were legitimate, but that the opportunity is now here, and that we need to be faithful to obey the Great Commission to make disciples of all nations. And so I want to challenge us and just kind of put that out there today for us to begin thinking about that. Well, if you have a Bible, I would really love it if you would open that Bible, or if you would open up your Bible app on your phone, and let's look at Ephesians chapter 5. As I've been thinking about this and thinking about what's changed in the last year, and what my responsibility is to respond to that change, and to thrive, and just to move forward. And honestly, guys, I have to say I'm excited about the future. Are there problems? Are there troubles? Are there challenges? Absolutely. Has there really, though, ever been a time in your life where there weren't problems and troubles? Probably not. I mean, those are things that we all face on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, yearly basis at different levels. And so I am moving forward with some optimism, with some excitement. I just refuse to get bogged down, and I'm just going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying, and if I fail, I'm going to learn from that failure, and I'm going to just keep on trying. And I really believe that that's the difference between success and failure, that the people who are successful, they just learn from their failure and they move on. That is why Elon Musk and other great leaders and American entrepreneurs and businessmen are successful. They don't give up. They have a can-do attitude. They try things, they fail, they learn from that failure, and they just keep trying, and they keep working. And churches that do that, and families that do that, they overcome hardship, they overcome obstacles, they overcome those things that can cause us to become disabled, and they just press on towards the goal that Christ has put before them. And so I want to read, if you would, join me in Ephesians chapter 5. We're going to begin in verse 15, where it says, "Pay careful attention then to how you walk, not as unwise people, but as wise." So here in the epistle, in this epistle of Ephesians, we have this caution, this warning, this signal to pay attention to what? To how you walk. All right. So in other words, how we live. It's just, walking is just an allegory of how we travel, how we go from circumstance to circumstance in life, from situation to situation. And so it's how you walk, how you conduct yourself, how you live your life. So pay careful attention. So we're not supposed to just be flippant and frivolous and just, oh, well, and just kind of let life happen and everything's, and we kind of get this maybe sarcastic attitude, and we're just, kind of give up, and we're not being thoughtful and careful and meticulous in how we're doing things. We're not being intentional. Instead of affecting life, we're just being the victim. We're letting it happen to us and just fall upon us. And so the Bible says that we are to pay careful attention to how I walk. And then in what way? Well, it says to not as unwise people, but as wise. All right, so let's explore our formula that we've discussed before of what wisdom is, and that is knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. And it's not always just that simple, but that's how I think of it. So we need to acquire knowledge and understanding, but then we also need to apply that knowledge, and over time, through experience and through success and failure, we gain wisdom. It doesn't just happen. Just because you're old, that doesn't mean you're wise. You can be young and wise. It is harder. Yeah, because why? Well, because you just haven't had as many experiences. But the Bible says that you don't let people look down on you because you're young. Choose wisdom at a young age, and you will exponentially be wise when you get some gray hair. So let's continue on. Then it says, don't be unwise, but as wise, making the most of the time because the days are evil. All right, so what does that mean? I mean, that's kind of a strange statement. Well, let's break that up into two parts. First of all, we need to make most of our time. And that's where some of us are just inefficient. We spend an hour a day primping and making our hair look good and stuff. Obviously, I don't, but I probably need to spend a little more time on that. But we just spend a lot of time on vanity and frivolous things, and we're not making the most of our time. Well, we could be diligently sowing seed and producing wealth. We can be producing and serving others that are in need, and fixing things in our life that are broken, and taking care of the things that need to be taken care of. But we're just gotten kind of like that lazy cow that's just out in the pasture and just enjoying the good life. And then winter comes, and then there's nothing to eat, and it's kind of like, what am I going to do now? And so if we've got to be determined to make the most of our time, because the days are evil. So what does that mean? Well, we know that ever since we were cast out of the garden, that we are subjected to the enemy, who runs around the world. This is my paraphrase. Runs around the world looking for believers and good, decent human beings that they can discourage and frustrate and cause calamity in their life. Until Christ returns and he makes everything right, and he makes his good creation that is now corrupted good again, the days are evil, that we are going to labor and toil and come up against difficulty, and we're going to be tempted by the enemy. We're going to be tempted by our own flesh to do evil and to self-sabotage our lives. And so it's not a reason just to get down and just give up, but it's a reason to realize, we're going to come up against struggle, and there's going to be strife that you do need. I mean, working hard and being an effective, decent human being is a requirement of life. If you fail to do that, you are going to generally fail at life. And so the scriptures are pretty clear, and they don't show favoritism or bias. They just kind of tell us how it is, that we must make the most of our time, because there are challenges. And when the rain comes, the storm comes, when winter comes, when high inflation comes, if we were unprepared, we will suffer calamity. And so that's just an opportunity to learn from failure. And maybe you're watching this, and maybe you have been a part of this ministry for years and years, that you were part of PLG back in the, I guess I'm trying to think when we started that, maybe 2017, 2018, 2019, that you heard the truth spoken, and you you had the opportunity to buy a dozen eggs for $1, and you had the opportunity to position yourself in a way so that when inflation came, when the rain came, you would thrive. And you just didn't. Due to laziness, due to whatever, maybe you just didn't believe that hard times were coming. And now you're wrecked. And you're like, oh man, I had the opportunity and I blew it. Well, you know what? I have made that mistake many times in my life. And the only course of action that makes sense is just to learn from that failure and to move on. I've had lots of times in my life where I had opportunities. I should have just grabbed the bull by the horns and gone for it and worked that extra hour or gone that extra mile, but I didn't. And then I suffered the consequences of that. Well, that doesn't mean to give up or it's too late. Economic cycles happen over and over and over again. And there's going to be a season where you can stock up and invest for a strong return, and there's going to be those chances for, to use a biblical example, those 7 years of plenty where you can store up grain for those 7 years of famine. And so if you were unprepared and unready for this season, that's okay. Just don't be discouraged, but don't give up either. And don't just say, oh, that's just how the world is. It's so unfair. I'm a victim. I can't do anything about it. Those are all lies. The Bible has said the days are evil. We have to make the most of our time. So work hard, store up, because guys, opportunities are here. Our virtual, several of we mine virtual currencies, or we provide server and blockchain processing for virtual currencies. We have had our biggest month ever in January, in the midst of the crypto winter, in the midst of the stock market catastrophe, in the midst of extremely high inflation. And this is the time right now when everybody's negative and everybody's thinking, oh, it's just the economy's in the toilet. It's never going to get better. There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, this is the time to look for those businesses that are for sale for pennies on the dollar, those shares of stock, those virtual currencies that are bringing great yields, but that are 90% discounted from what they were, when everybody was FOMOing. That's fear of missing out, FOMO. Hopefully you've heard that term. That now everybody's, just the ship is sinking. It's the Titanic. We're all going to die. And that's the time, as Warren Buffett says, when there's blood in the streets, that's the time where you want to be looking for opportunities. And so this is a great season. We're going to talk more about all of that, how practical ways you can do that. We're kind of running a little bit low on time today. But we're going to be talking more about how you can do that. But this is the season to do that. When prices are depressed, and when, or not necessarily prices, some prices are extremely undepressed. But when the opportunities are there, where people just aren't investing and they're scared and they're feeling uncertain, those are the times to go in and to make wise decisions, to do those things that the Lord's put on your heart to do. This can be one of the best times to do that. Now, the Bible also says, don't be foolish. So we're going on in verse 17, but understand what the Lord's will is. All right. So we do have to, we can put our best try hard on and work 5 jobs and do all kinds of crazy stuff and still never accomplish what God wants us to accomplish if we don't understand His will. So that definitely is a topic for another porch talk, but something that we need to be prayerfully considering on a regular basis. And then an example is given. It says, don't get drunk with wine, which leads to reckless actions, but be filled by the Spirit. All right, so using that as an example, and it could be drugs, idolatry. There's a lot of examples, but the scriptures use wine, so we'll go with that, or alcohol. That when we shortchange ourselves, we go for the short-term fix. All right, so that'd be like we're swiping the credit card for because we want a new couch, or because whatever it is that we just want or we feel like we have to have. Then we're basically, that's kind of like getting drunk. You may feel better for a while, but eventually once you sober up, all your problems are still there. You're out the money for the alcohol, and you probably have a really bad hangover and your head's hurting, from drinking too much. So that never solves the problem. It just delays it for a short duration, and sometimes it can create a whole new set of problems, because when you take away your ability to make wise, sensible decisions, and you give it over to the bottle and let the bottle decide, oftentimes the bottle decides badly. And sometimes it decides that you should get in your car and drive down the road and you kill somebody and change someone else's life forever. And now not only is your life wrecked, their life is wrecked. So, and it's not to hate on, that one particular sin, but, all sin is like that. All addictions, everything when we exchange the truth for a lie, whatever that is, through living in an immoral lifestyle, a moral relationship, filling our mind with trash, filling our ears with trash, whatever it is, that never is the solution. So the Bible gives us a great alternative to, rather than fill ourselves with sin, we should fill ourselves with the Spirit. Where does the Spirit come from? Christ himself, the Father, sent the Spirit into the world to indwell the believer. So for those who choose Christ, that we would have the helper, we would have that force, that power that gives us the strength to overcome the darkness and the lies of the enemy. And that is a powerful, powerful truth today, and I will leave you with that. Excited about next week. I'm going to flip back to my notes here. Next week we're going to be talking about the surprising power of influence, and we'll continue on kind of some of these topics that we've introduced today. If you don't have a church home, I would invite you to come join us on Sundays. Pastor Scott is taking us through a great sermon series for such a time as this, and boy, it really is, it is such a time for us to turn our hearts towards the Lord and towards wisdom and truth and understanding. And so encourage you to join us at 9:30 at River Bluff Fellowship, 2655 East Farm Road 188, and I'd love to have you join us. Make sure and comment if you have questions. Don't hesitate to reach out. Again, we appreciate you sharing this on your Facebook page or on social media to help us get the word out. Excited to see how God works through this ministry and see how he works in your life for this spring. Wish you all the very, very best. My prayer today is that everyone who's listening, that the Lord would just bring blessing into your life. He would bring a gentle rebuke so that you would have the opportunity to turn away from sin and frustration and difficulty and all the things that have kind of led you to times of hardship, or not hardship necessarily, but the consequences and the hardship that sin brings, into a time where we can take that investment and that hard work and that diligence and we can turn it into something that brings blessing and goodness and brings life change and opportunity for those who are in need and to ourselves and our own families. Wish you guys all the best. Hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. We will see you next Thursday at 4 o'clock. Take care.